Hello and welcome to this mini review of Splatoon 3 for the Nintendo Switch. I don't actually talk about it very often on the channel, but I'm actually a pretty big fan of the Splatoon series. I had the first one on the Wii U, then of course I upgraded to Splatoon 2 when I got my Switch, and now we're here with a second Splatoon experience on the same system, which was unexpected to say the least. The question here though is that with us having two Splatoon games on a single console, does the third entry do enough to separate itself from Splatoon 2? Let's start by taking a look at the main selling point of Splatoon, which is of course the main multiplayer mode. Turf Wars have been functionally the same since the first Splatoon game, with two teams of 4 players shooting ink at the floor in order to have the most coverage before time runs out. You can of course choose to shoot at your opponents and splat them, which will temporarily remove them from the battle and have them respawn back at the base, but even if you don't play aggressively and go for splats, you can still win just by shooting at the floor. It's a really interesting and original take on a shooter, and it still holds up really well. The issue is that it's basically exactly the same as what we've already done a million times in Splatoon 1 and 2. Sure, there's some new maps, although only 5 out of 12 of them are actually fully original ones. There's some new sub-weapons and special weapons, and there's also 2 brand new types of main weapon too. These come in the form of the Splatana and the Tri-Stinger, both of which I'm not all that keen on, but they are there if you want to use them. But overall, these new elements are extremely minimal here, which is initially quite disappointing. The main brand new mode added into Splatoon 2 was the Salmon Run co-op experience, and of course this also returns in Splatoon 3. One of the main changes here is that Salmon Run is always available to play and doesn't get arbitrarily closed at certain times like it did in Splatoon 2. There's also 4 new types of boss enemies to fight and a brand new extra wave that can randomly happen, in which you fight off against a huge Godzilla fish hybrid. Oh, and you can also now throw the golden eggs which you collect by beating boss enemies too, useful for throwing them into your team's basket from a distance, or even passing them to teammates if you're in a pinch. Again though, despite these changes, it all feels somewhat minor in the grand scheme of things, and Salmon Run feels almost identical to the version that was in Splatoon 2. For you hardcore Splatoon players, you'll be glad to hear that the ranked battles return from the previous games, but have been renamed Anarchy Battles and feature a slightly altered leveling up system. The thing is though is that yet again, this is almost identical to the equivalent mode in Splatoon 2. The game types featured in these Anarchy Battles are Splat Zones, Tower Control, Rainmaker and Clam Blitz. And yeah, while some of these have been slightly altered, like with Rainmaker requiring you to hit different checkpoints rather than just running straight to the end goal in your enemy's base, these are the exact same 4 game types that we had in the ranked mode in Splatoon 2. Couldn't they have come up with some new game types here? This would have been one of the main draws of the game for me, and I kinda feel like they messed it up. So basically, so far, Splatoon 3 is the same game as Splatoon 2, only very slightly modified and with a brand new hub area. This new hub is very good by the way, feeling much bigger and more bustling than the hub areas from Splatoon 1 and 2, but that's clearly not enough to sell you the game, is it? So, what is actually new in Splatoon 3 that's worth bringing attention to? To be completely honest, the most significant changes made in Splatoon 3 aren't even about the gameplay itself, and it's more about quality of life stuff. For example, you can now really easily create rooms for your friends to join, and you can play together from there, either in Turf Wars, Anarchy Battles, or Salmon Runs, and you'll always be together on the same team. This seems like a stupid thing to be pointing out, but remember, Splatoon 2 didn't have a system like this, and it was a common occurrence to attempt to join a friend and have to wait for a few matches before you actually joined in because their game lobby could easily just be full. It was also a situation where even if you did manage to get into the same game as your friend, you and your friend could be placed on opposing teams. Luckily though, Splatoon 3 completely fixes this with its new party system, and the matchmaking in Splatoon 3 is also in general a lot faster than it was in 2. Plus, another benefit is that you don't need to just sit there and stare at a menu while you wait either. You're allowed to explore a little waiting room area and you can test out your weapons and warm up before the match actually begins. The squid jump minigame from Splatoon 1 is still absent though, which just makes me very sad. Did you know that there was 3 other minigames in Splatoon 1 as well, with Squid Racer, Squid Ball and Squid Beats? You unlock them by using the Splatoon amiibo, and I literally didn't even know about this, even though I have the amiibo right here. Squid Beats, of course, returned in Splatoon 2, but why have these other ones never appeared again? Other than the smoother matchmaking system though, we do have a couple of other more minor things that make the Splatoon experience more rewarding and varied. You now have access to titles, stickers and banners, which will display your name at the start and at the end of matches. You have a locker which you can customise with items unlocked through gameplay or through the in-game shop, which by the way only uses the in-game currency. There's no microtransactions in Splatoon, thank God. And you know what, this locker customization is actually pretty good. You basically just place items and stickers on and inside the locker and then share it online so that other people can look at it. But some people have really gone above and beyond with this and have some really nice looking lockers, and some of course are just done for the memes too. It's an extremely minor thing that I doubt most people will care about, especially when the game isn't new anymore, but it does give you more things to do, which is appreciated. The other more major thing in Splatoon 3 is the only fully original new mode, which takes the form of table turf battles. This is a little bit complicated to properly explain, but once you've had a few matches, it'll click with you. The gist of this is that table turf battles is a tabletop card game version of a turf war. You have this deck of cards with each one inking a certain number and a certain pattern of ink on a grid. The objective then is to ink the most blocks on the board, but the catch is that you can't ink over your own colours or the colours of your opponent. So the tactic becomes trying to ink as far up the grid towards your enemy as possible and then blocking them off so that you can go back and fill in as many spaces as possible. There's a more advanced thing you can do here as well, where if you completely surround these special squares with ink, either your enemies or your own, you'll get a special point, and if you build up a certain number of these, you can do a special attack which can actually ink over an opponent's squares and is the only way that that's possible. It's actually a really good game mode and I was enjoying it far more than I thought I would. You unlock harder opponents as you go through it, and you also start getting differently laid out grids too. Plus, by playing other modes in the game, you'll unlock more cards and you can fully customise your deck. That's something I actually really like about the Splatoon experience in general, to be honest. I like how you unlock stuff by playing a particular mode, but it'll unlock something for a different mode from the one that you're playing. It's like the whole game has this sort of cross-progression system, despite all of the modes also having their own individual progression systems on top of that. It keeps the game constantly rewarding, no matter what you're doing. The final major thing I have to talk about with Splatoon 3 is something that I've been holding off on mentioning until the end. With most games, this would be the first thing you would want to talk about, but with Splatoon, this never really feels like the focus of the game, and weirdly, it's more of a side mode. But of course, we have to talk about the main single player experience here, with the return of the Mammalians mode. I'm going to cut to the chase here and simply say that this is the best single player experience that's ever been offered in a Splatoon game, and is the first time that I feel like they've got every element of it nailed. There's some things that they could have done better, of course. Primarily I think that it could have had much more visual variety rather than every single area being snowy. But outside of that, and maybe its kinda short length, this is really good. The structure of it kind of combines the normal single-player experience of Splatoon with the much superior Octo expansion experience from Splatoon 2, and it works insanely well. You basically start the game in this small openly designed area, and you slowly uncover new routes to traverse by getting your little small fry friend to eat this instant death goo that's blocking your path. In order to do that though, you need a certain number of power eggs, and to get those you need to enter the main linear levels and complete some sort of trial. These trials can be extremely varied, from simply making your way to the end of a course, covering a statue in ink, riding on rails and destroying targets, completing an obstacle course without touching enemy ink, fighting through enemy gauntlets, and way more on top of this. The thing I love about this though, compared to Splatoon 1 and 2's main single player, is that the linear levels don't feature any hidden collectibles, and instead all of that hidden stuff is found in the main hub world. This improves the flow of the game to a huge degree, because now you can just focus on the actual objective in the proper levels, rather than stopping every couple of seconds to look for a hidden platform off of the side of the level or behind a wall. It also makes the hub world much more memorable, because you're actually incentivized to explore it in order to find upgrade materials to make your suit better, or to find stuff to customize yourself in the other modes of the game. Plus, no spoilers here by the way, but the ending is amazing too. There's also some pretty in-depth lore to find about the Splatoon universe that was really interesting to read through as well. Overall, so far this is probably the mode in the game that I've enjoyed the most. I've even gone as far as to 100% it already. I really hope that we get some more single player DLC in the future, and I heavily suspect that we will. If I had a main gripe with the single player, I would probably say that it's maybe slightly strange that it isn't playable in co-op, or at least at a separate co-op mode. With Splatoon being all about multiplayer, I would have thought that this was a no-brainer, but it doesn't really matter too much I suppose. There are also two other elements of Splatoon 3 which I actually can't talk about because they're timed events and none of them have happened yet. One of these being the Tricolour Turf Wars, which only happen in the second half of Splatfests, and then there's also another brand new mode called the Big Run, which has the Salmonid enemies from Salmon Run invade the main hub area of the game. This sounds absolutely awesome, but I think that this is only going to happen every so often and will probably be a huge event that lots of players get involved in. Almost like a co-op version of a Splatfest, I suppose. So yeah, Splatoon 3 is extremely similar to the second game, potentially too similar, and it could have done with offering a few new modes on top of what's currently here. Maybe some kind of Battle Royale mode could have been interesting, or at the very least they could have given us more modes for the Anarchy Battles. But even with that being said, I struggle to be too mad when the modes that have been brought over from the previous games have been fine-tuned and perfected to such a degree. I mean, it's basically Splatoon 2 Deluxe, but is that really such a bad thing? Even if I'm playing modes I've already played before, I'm enjoying all of the small changes and new options, and as a result I'm probably enjoying Splatoon 3 more than I ever enjoyed 2. Overall, Splatoon 3 is the best Splatoon experience to date, but at the same time I did kind of expect maybe a little bit more, especially because Splatoon 2 is already available on the same system. But the thing is, you never know how much the game will change with updates. Splatoon is a very well supported game with post-release content, and I suspect that we'll be getting a few big content drops in the near future. So let's all hope that this review doesn't age well, and by the end of its lifespan it has way more new modes and features than it currently does. Let me know if you've been playing Splatoon 3 and what you've been thinking about it so far. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, splat all over that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time. Bye!